Good morning, everybody. Title of my talk is Upgrade Your Mandate, Evolving from User Experience to Customer Experience. I think I'm going to end up, or one of the things I realized sitting in yesterday as well, is that there are going to be quite a few themes that I think run throughout yesterday and today. I'm going to be touching on some stuff you've heard yesterday, as well as stuff that will probably be said later today. So what I think is interesting about that is that the people who are looking at this situation are arriving at some of the same conclusions, and I think by kind of hammering away at those, that might suggest certain directions to go. For me, the story begins with a project I actually did with Brandon about 4 or 5 years ago now. We were working for a financial services firm, and as part of our work, we did a lot of in-home customer research. We were trying to understand how people managed the financial planning in their lives. And in that customer research, we saw a lot of very interesting things, how they use paper statements, where they do their work, whether it's on a couch with a laptop or in a home office. One of my favorite things is this blue, the DOS screen that you see in the upper middle there, a woman who refused to get rid of her old IBM PC because it had certain information and programs on it that she was afraid of trying to move to a more modern computer, and so she actually did a fair bit of work on this really kind of ancient machine. And through this experience, we really understood the context within which people were trying to manage their financial lives. And it was kind of interesting in its complexity and messiness. Now, we had been brought in to redesign their website. And their website, you know, one particular channel in the service experience. Through the efforts that through our research, though, we recognized that there were many other touch points that mattered. The monthly statement that people got, their interactions with call centers, their interactions with a branch, their interactions even with like some of the collateral and material, such as this planning guide that helps you plan out your financial life. And while our research demonstrated that, yes, their website was broken, which was almost self-evident, what it also pointed out was that there were other elements in this experience that were also broken. And our concern was that if we were to simply focus on fixing the website, we wouldn't be addressing the whole customer problem. Additionally, we wouldn't be getting the most out of that website work because the frustrations that people had with other touch points kind of led them to throw their hands up when engaging with this company. So they might not even make it to the website because of their frustrations with the monthly statement or their frustrations with using a call center. And all the work that we would be doing on the website wouldn't realize its full potential. So we shared this insight with the people we were working with, our clients. This is an actual org chart we were given. This is only one part of the organization. This is the marketing part of the organization, which is where the website lived. You know, they're, as a financial services firm, they had, you know, you can imagine one of the, you know, probably, I don't know, 10 of these to the left and to the right of it. But not only was this the part of the organization we were working with, we were actually working with one part of this part of the organization. And not only were we working with one part of this part of the organization, we were working 2 levels down within this part of the organization. Sorry for those in the back, but hopefully the joke still applies. And the issue that we had was when we told the people down here, hey, you know, the challenges you're facing go across touch points, across different parts of the organization, they said, well, that's all well and good. I don't even know who works on the monthly paper statements. I don't even know who works, you know, in managing our call center. They're so far removed from these other parts of the organization that they wouldn't even know where to begin in terms of solving the problem. And what became clear is that the way that this organization was structured, you know, was structured by channels of delivery. But obviously, the customer's experience crosses those channels somewhat willy-nilly. And if you're organized in such a way that you're not able to react to that meaningfully, you're going to have essentially these broken experiences. The other issue, I mean, there were a bunch of other issues that they faced. They were given more work than they could handle, so asking them to do extra work in terms of reaching out to other parts of the organization simply wasn't going to happen. And we talked a little bit about this last night at drinks. they definitely had a challenge of the kind of the frozen middle, the middle management that holds on to whatever power and authority it has, and also tends to be incented to fight the last war as opposed to the coming challenges. And that often leads to making it difficult for organizations to break free from these kind of departmental silos. But what we realized is that, in order for companies, in order for us to truly serve our audience, we need to overcome these legacy approaches and embrace new ways, engage the audience in new ways. Another personal story, 2008 was the year that I decided I no longer cared that I was a frequent flyer on United. I had actually gotten up to Premier Executive, never 1K, but I'd gotten up to Premier Executive, and pretty much the only benefit I could discern was that I got exit row seating, which is nice, but when I had actual challenges, I had booked some travel with my wife and my child at the time, who was 6 weeks old. They ended up not being able to travel. I was still basically asked to spend a lot of money to change out their tickets, et cetera. Like the loyalty that the supposed loyalty that I had built up over years with them was meaningless to them. And I decided, you know what, it's not worth it. It's not worth giving this company business so that I can occasionally get exit row seating. And in fact, I've realized in the last month I'm no longer even Premier on United. And it was a shock at first. I mean, who here is Premier on United? Any San Francisco? Not too many folks. San Franciscans tend to be Premier on United, especially people consulting, because they travel a lot and United kind of owns SFO. And I realized that I had kind of come to peace with no longer feeling like I needed to have that badge on United anymore. And because again, I recognize that the experience isn't really that much better. And it's not just me who recognized this. I'm going to play a little video here, which you might be familiar with.
I flew United Airlines on my way to Nebraska. The plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's O'Hare. While on the ground, a passenger said from the seat behind me, "My God, they're throwing guitars out there." The band and I exchanged a look, best described as terror, at the action on the tarmac, and knowing whose projectiles these would be. So before I left Chicago, I alerted 3 employees who showed complete indifference towards me.
So, had folks seen this video before? You probably have, because, and one of the reasons I wanted to show this is we do have Margaret from YouTube speaking later today. It's had over 8 million views. And I thought that was really interesting as a reflection of the frustration that people are facing dealing with these giant legacy airlines and the terrible service that they're providing. This has kind of become this cathartic opportunity to rail at United. Now, so there's a lot of deep-seated frustration with companies like United, as this expresses. There was a report that Forrester did in 2008 where they ranked the customer experience of 114 different companies, all American companies. At the bottom, under poor, were basically the United States legacy carriers. Sorry for those in the back. U.S. Airways, Northwest Airlines, United Airlines, Delta, and American, all rated poor. One of the big airlines rated fair. That's Continental Airlines. Hi, April. We have a couple folks from Continental here. But Continental, I mean, compared to that, that's actually quite good. And as you can imagine, there was only one airline that actually rated good, and that was Southwest. And so where is Southwest? Why is Southwest able to have these rankings that are far far out of the league of their competitors? Well, one of the hints is actually reflected in this image where it says Colleen Barrett, heroine of the heart. Colleen Barrett was president, she's now president emeritus of Southwest Airlines, and she was largely responsible, oops, that's an error. She was largely responsible for the culture of Southwest starting in the early 70s. She kind of was the chief culture officer. And this is a quote from Herb Kelleher, founder. Colleen is responsible for the humanistic culture that we have. She gave the people on the front line a lot of flexibility, recognized that we could not anticipate every situation that would evolve. Therefore, she told our employees and meant it that as long as you are leaning toward the customer, you are okay. This is corporate policy at Southwest. I can guarantee that this is not corporate policy at United Airlines. I can guarantee United Airlines probably has a policy manual thicker than the healthcare bill on how you're allowed to behave with customers, and that if you stray from that, you will get demerits or whatever bad things happen within United Airlines, right? But what this demonstrated is that customer experience is not well, the interesting thing here with Southwest Airlines compared to these other airlines is that it's also the cheapest option, right? Southwest is the low-cost airline. And it basically is true. If you do price comparison from Southwest to any of those other airlines, they will come out cheaper. And what, to me, that signifies is that customer experience isn't something an organization buys. You do not simply invest in customer experience and go out and purchase a bunch of customer experience and then try to deploy customer experience. But it's a mindset that an organization adopts. So the trick, probably the first trick in moving from user experience to customer experience is helping your organization change its mindset, generally change its mindset about how it considers engaging with customers. One of the things that needs to be overcome in order to adopt this mindset are four kind of old ways of thinking about customers. The first way that is not too common, but still does exist sadly, is thinking about customers as a gullet whose only purpose in life is to gulp products and crap cash, right? So again, most companies aren't this terrible except for maybe the telecommunications firms. I don't know if we have anybody from AT&T and Verizon, but that would be about few companies are this base. More typical, perhaps, is this perception that our customers are docile and gullible, that they like stories and messaging, and if you tell them, just the right, give them just the right advertising, just the right marketing, appeal to their sense of preferences, you can get them to behave, and you can herd them toward what it is that you have to offer. A third way of thinking, and this is pretty typical within, we find within kind of technology firms where perhaps, say engineering-driven companies, is that the customer is kind of this homo economicus, that they're a highly rational being, that they want to maximize utility, and what they want is quantity. They want the most features and the most bang for the buck, and that they will do the analysis to realize that. However, basically, what you're suggesting about your customers then
totally illogical
is that they're Vulcan, right? Like, this isn't really how people are. And then the last way of thinking, perhaps the most enlightened, but still I think falling short. We heard actually about tasks and goals yesterday, right? Customers are task-oriented, they're goal-driven, and what they seek is efficiency, effectiveness, productivity. But if you extend that out, what you get is essentially this kind of robot mindset, right? That they're just seeking to be as productive as possible. But again, also not necessarily accurate with respect to how people actually are. So this is building a little funny. So what I would argue is that none of those are necessarily wrong, but they need to be managed. You need to think about them in concert. You need to understand the whole person. And people are triggered by emotions and engage emotionally. That was something else that Richard mentioned yesterday, where they try to understand the emotional concerns when it comes to investment. They have intellectual concerns. They do think about the problem at hand, and they have functional concerns. They have a basic set of needs that needs to be met. So you need to take all of these into account. And I think the problem that most companies face is that they kind of pick and choose one of them and go after it. And instead, we need to start embracing the whole. We had an experience with a different financial services firm. This was a bank where we did a mental model exercise where we we did some research and we recognized the tasks that people were engaged in, and we put the material that the bank had to serve those tasks on the bottom, and it was revealing and it was helpful. But again, one of the things we recognized is that we were really only responding to kind of the robot side of people, their attempts at being effective and productive. And we had this gut feeling that that was insufficient. So we actually did another analysis that we ended up calling the thematic model, for lack of a better term. I'm going to zoom in on part of it. And in this analysis, we tried to understand what was going on perhaps at a deeper level, at a more cognitive level, psychological level than a kind of a behavioral level. And there were two things that really came up. One was a desire for knowledge. And that desire for knowledge grew out of this fear of being manipulated. And that fear of being manipulated and a desire to be a responsible consumer. Everybody knows that if I'm shopping, I should comparison shop and stuff. So those things led to people seeking knowledge as power. We actually had someone say, knowledge is power, because they want to be able to go into the bank with a ton of data, a ton of information, say, this is what I need, you're not going to snow me. The problem was that when it comes to financial services, it's very hard to articulate an end state. People don't know the terms, the fees, the length of times, et cetera. It's just a bunch of numbers. It's very abstract. It's not like going out and buying a physical product, a digital camera or something. And so what we saw is that people were simply going through the motions. If we had just focused on the behaviors, from a behavioral standpoint, they actually looked like they were doing the right thing. But what we recognized is that they would never commit. They would never cross that chasm into engaging, because what they needed was their emotional requirements to be met. They needed to feel comfortable with this bank, or they would just kind of keep behaving but not really moving forward. And so by understanding the intellectual and the emotional requirements, we were able to deliver a better solution than just thinking about the behavioral requirements solely. What this is all about, really, in terms of thinking about the emotional, the intellectual, and the functional, is engendering empathy. All that matters. I don't care how you arrive at it, but all that matters is to have an honestly empathetic sense for your customer. Not just you, though. This is something you need to figure out how to bring to your entire organization. The tool that we have found that is still best for doing this, and this is not an innovation necessarily, is the persona. We still have yet to find a better single tool for helping an entire organization understand who their customers are than the persona. Now, we have some different takes perhaps on how a persona is constructed than other organizations. This is pretty typical in terms of an overview, though we always make a point of having pull quotes in that person's voice. In fact, this whole thing is in the voice of Russell. Russell is a corporate controller. This came from a project we did with Silicon Valley Bank, where we were helping them better understand corporate finance teams within organizations of a certain size. And so we went into these companies, interviewed some folks, and one of the personas that emerged was of this corporate controller. And if you're not familiar with this role, it's essentially the chief accountant. So we understood their background. We understood Russell's kind of characteristics. What are the qualities of a controller such as Russell that are worth identifying? But it was also really important for us to understand what motivates Russell, what really stokes him. One of the ways that we were actually able to win this business, we showed personas from a prior project to them. They really loved this one slide on the others, which was up at night. What keeps people up at night? That's a really interesting kind of catalyzing, organizing force. If you can figure out how to address that, that can be quite revealing. We also paid attention to behavior. I don't want to knock behavior, but again, behavior needs to be considered in a larger framework. Now, the personas we delivered were essentially, as such, reflected in a PowerPoint presentation. There was more to it than that, but because of some time constraints, we weren't able to do much more. what was really interesting to us is that Silicon Valley Bank took those personas. Make sure you're looking at this picture of Russell. It took a while to find an appropriate photo on the web of someone that looked like one of these corporate controllers. They took these personas and within SVB hired actors and shot video of them being interviewed. Oops, sorry.
Oddly enough, what keeps me going is actually avoiding problems, avoiding crises. Right now, the lines for financial compliance are pretty tight together, and navigating that stream, making sure you're between those, making sure you don't have any problems is what motivates me. And I like coming in and helping to grow that company, because the more the company grows, the more I can grow with it, the more impact I can have on how this company functions in a global marketplace. For me, I think it's those gray areas. Even if you know every one of the rules on the 25,000 pages of financial compliance, there's always going to be gray areas. And it's those judgment calls that you're just going to have to make sometimes. And the only way you can make them is just be as well informed as you possibly can, and you sweat those.
So these personas, we had three as well, two others in addition to Russell. They shot video for each of them, have become part of Silicon Valley Bank's internal training. When they onboard somebody, they show them these videos now to help them get a better understanding of who their customers are as people. Because when Silicon Valley Bank came to us, they had a sense of who their customers were as organizations, as market segments, but they recognized that they didn't have any of that empathy. They didn't really know who these individuals were and how they could maybe better serve them. So that's why they asked us to do the research and develop these personas, and since then, they're now talking about Russell, and then Lawrence and Cecilia were the two others, and about how to better serve them. And I love that they have embraced them such that they're willing to spend their own time and money to produce these videos and to share them internally. The other thing I want to point out, this was not a web project at all. This was a project for SVB strategy team, and it's meant to inform marketing materials, how their client service representatives engage with folks, et cetera, across the board. In fact, we've had a little bit of challenge engaging with the web team in IT because it didn't just talk about the website. But that's a separate story. So understanding your customers as people, embracing their totality, and then figuring out how to share that in a way that the rest of the organization is crucial in terms of helping an organization adopt the mindset. Once you get an organization really on board with helping these customers and better understanding it, the trick is, okay, now what? How do we translate that into action? Now, one of the challenges that I think, well, not one of the challenges, but these are companies that when you think about customer experience, these are ones that perhaps come up. They tend to rank highly. They're known for their success in large part because of their experience. And the thing that they all share is kind of a visionary CEO type, right? And so a lot of times I think companies throw their hands up and say, well, we're not going to be able to do it because we don't have a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos who's going to make sure it happens from the top down and make it a corporate commitment. We can't get our executives to understand or pay attention. And I totally understand and respect that concern, but what we have seen evidence that you don't need that charismatic visionary in order to make change. Last year, you might remember that I ended up chatting with the Vice President of User Experience and Design, Margaret Schmidt, from TiVo. If you weren't here last year, you wouldn't have known anybody probably at TiVo. TiVo does not have an obvious charismatic visionary leader, but they produce, by all accounts, great customer experiences. When TiVo launched, this was essentially what they were competing against, right? So perhaps they had it not so hard, but when back in the day in 1997 or 8, this was what they were competing against. They came up with this set of mantras. It's entertainment stupid, it's TV stupid, video damn it. It's very aggressive, I know, but it helped catalyze an entire organization. This was the religion within TiVo in terms of delivering great design. Again, it didn't come from some visionary leader who insisted on certain things. It came from the group figuring out how to fulfill on this mission and create a whole new experience for how people engage and relate with television. Not just the on-screen interface, but things like the famous kind of peanut remote as well. We're all informed by this. TiVo has since kind of mellowed out perhaps the aggression in a new set of mantras. They've also, I think, interestingly made them from the perspective of the customer as opposed to the perspective of the business. So I can't imagine life without it. It's easy to use. It puts me in control. I would argue, though, that they might have watered them down a bit, too. I wish I realized that kind of after the fact. I wish to ask Margaret about that, because these are not as explicit. These are almost design directives, whereas that is, it's still, you get the sense of what they want to do to help and how it can guide decisions, but perhaps not as acute. But, as Margaret pointed out, these rules, these mantras are applied throughout a process. This is an unboxing of a TiVo. And in talking to Margaret, she pointed out how her group and user experience in general really does inform that entire process. Another company that you don't tend to think of as delivering great experiences is Microsoft. For perhaps good reason. If you think back to Word 6, right, a whole bunch of buttons and a very little space to type. It actually got worse after that with expandy menus and Clippy, and then they had even more features, so they had to add this task pane on the far right-hand side. Right, it had gotten kind of overwhelming and overbearing. This material actually comes from a presentation given by Jensen Harris, who was one of the people responsible for the Office 2007 UI and the ribbon and the radical change. And they came up with what they called tenets. So TiVo calls them mantras. Microsoft called them tenets, but these were also held as religion within the product team at Microsoft. And again, they kind of bubble up. So it's not a charismatic visionary leader saying this is how it's got to be. This is a group agreeing this is what we want to achieve. Person's focus should be on their content, not the UI. Reduce the number of choices, increase efficiency. These are a bit more directive. This is something you can kind of design against, right? Straightforward is better than clever means no Clippy, right? Clippy's clever. Clippy is not straightforward. So you're able to make decisions based on this set of tenets. Over on the Windows 7 team, they actually came up with a similar set of tenets. They called them UX principles. And what I like about that is they've got these 8 kind of top line, but then they also have a set of points of support, so you kind of know that you're delivering on it. And the most important thing was that this was extremely digestible, again, for an entire team, printed out on a sheet of paper and put it up in your wall, put it up in your queue, put it up, so you always were kind of immersed in it. Again, this isn't top-down, this isn't a visionary directing, this is here's what we've agreed to, this is how we're going to not only have a coherent experience, but a really good experience. And I know that there are, not everybody has bought into the new Office UI paradigm. Their research and their surveys suggest that it works very well. I've been trying to find good customer satisfaction results around it, but I can't find any published. If you know of any, I'd be happy to read it. But it almost doesn't matter how successful it is, because for the sake of this conversation, what matters is that they were able to make a radical change to a cash cow in their organization, and a huge input to that were those tenets, right? By holding those as religion and making those part of every conversation, they were able to make a huge change. Same thing with Windows 7, right? These are the 2 flagship, cornerstone, whatever products of Microsoft, both of which have changed significantly, and in large part due to these sets of principles or tenets that these product teams are adhering to. So when thinking about how do we move an organization, identify those tenets, identify that experience strategy essentially, and again, it doesn't have to come top down. Your group can be the one to share that out, get people on board, get people supporting it. Now, one way to make that happen better is making sure that you provide a compelling vision for that strategy.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
So that's a pretty compelling vision. And if I had more time, I would do more vision stuff. But I actually thought it was helpful for me at least, Heidi's talk yesterday about Chipotle, and she mentioned that vision booklet and how that was the kind of Bible that allowed them to make the changes that they did, right? You need to figure out how to capture what it is that you're doing, boil it down to an essence, and make it really compelling. This statement from President Kennedy, given in 1961 to a joint session of Congress, is kind of the poster statement of the book Made to Stick. We actually had Chip Heath speak a couple years ago. What you need to do as you're communicating your ideas throughout an organization is make sure that they are simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, tap into emotion, and are told in the frame of stories, which this statement from JFK does, right? Send a man on the moon, return him safely to the earth before the decade is out. So it gives you a goal, right? Before the decade is out, you know what you're going to do. So it's concrete, it's simple, it's all in one sentence. It's unexpected. Nobody, you know, this newly elected president who barely won is now saying we're going to beat the Russians essentially, and we're going to throw people to the moon. The one that it probably doesn't hit on is credibility. So maybe if you hit 5 of 6, it's okay. But I think it's a challenge that we user experience, customer experience folks face is we tend to get very caught up in our own lingo and our own processes and approaches, and we know what it means, and we forget that people that we're working with don't necessarily understand it. And so we always have to seek to better communicate and translate what it is that we're doing to help others. So now that you've got people kind of bought into a vision, you've done the research, you understand your customers, and you're getting people bought into a new experience strategy, you need to start engaging in design. You need to start making things. And there's 4 kind of typical ways of thinking about design that are, I think, kind of inhibiting us. And I'm going to talk about a 5th that should help us move forward. Now, typically organizations, when they think of design as aesthetics. I don't have to tell all of you that this is a challenge for us in the work we do, right? So for me, when I think of aesthetics and visual design, I think of premium vodka, where what's inside the bottles is basically identical, but they try to capture a whole mood and set of associations through the packaging. Not to denigrate aesthetics, but it's not sufficient. Another issue oftentimes is that design is seen as a distinct role, right? It's the goofy-looking folks with the black turtlenecks and the crazy hair and the chunky glasses. And the problem there is that design is seen as something that somebody else does, not something that I perhaps can be engaged in. And I think that's threatening to success when people don't feel like they can contribute to design, and not only contribute, that it's not their responsibility, that it's simply somebody else's responsibility that they can offload. Too often, design is thought of as a thing, as resulting in things, as artifacts, as stuff. And it's not understood that design can actually inform and help influence a wide range of activities, not just around the making of stuff. And most recently, you would think this is perhaps a good thing, that design is seen as this rock star. And if you bring the power of design into your organization, untold riches will fall from the heavens. And while that's probably done my business pretty well in the last few years, its ability to help can only go so far because it doesn't really recognize the hard work that is necessary in order to make this work, that you don't just sprinkle some design thinking activities and then you're realizing new value, but this needs to be embedded in your organization at a deeper level. And so this new way of thinking about design is also a very simple one. Design is simply an activity. Design is an activity that an entire organization needs to embrace and that everyone can be involved in. Design is a team sport. Right? We've got, sorry about the slide, the words on the bottom. In order to address the complexity of our challenges, we must widely draw from cross-functional teams, right? The stuff we are working on, especially as we move from user experience to customer experience, is far too complex for any one person or one group to handle. We need those cross-functional teams in order to understand the capabilities, in order to understand the concerns, in order to make progress, or what we're going to design won't work for some reason or another. This is an image from a project that we worked on. There's Brandon right there, actually, from a project we worked on, with a consumer electronics company that was going to be releasing a new electronic ink-based electronic reader. And just at this table, we were doing a design the box exercise to just kind of get people thinking and get folks sharing their ideas. Just at this table, you have a hardware engineer, a design strategist, a software engineer, an industrial designer, and a naming consultant. And this is just one table of 4 that we're working, right? All together, all brought together to figure out what it is that we are creating. Not to allow an engineer to write a set of specs and then pass that off to designers to then figure out the form of, and then or a business analyst to write the specs, give it to a designer who then gives it to a hardware engineer who then has the software engineer cobble something into it, right? That doesn't work. You've got to be together from the beginning thinking through these challenges. Now, the role of designers and perhaps design managers, I want to be sensitive to what Tal said because I think he's right in that there is a distinction. We become facilitators. We engage these cross-functional teams with their ideas, get all these ideas out of these people. Our role is to hone and refine them. There's still a lot of opportunity for the craft and practice of design to make change, but it's not that we have to be the generators of all the great ideas. And I think that's a fundamental shift. I'm going to end with one more story, not my story. This is a story that we at Adaptive Path love, and I will let Deborah speak for herself.
My grandmother happened to accidentally take my grandfather's medication. They were both prescribed the same drug, but just different dosage strengths. She took his medication by accident, and when I looked inside their medicine cabinet, I wasn't at all surprised that the error occurred. The problem was that the medication bottles looked practically identical. The only difference was their first names, which, by the way, start with the same 2 letters, H and E, and the dosage strengths.
So this is Deborah Adler. And at the time that she had this realization, she was getting her master's degree at the School of Visual Arts. And she realized, aha, thesis project. And so she created a program that she called Safe RX. And it was a redesign of the pill bottle. And the redesign of the pill bottle in order to make it, in order to avoid the problems that she saw. She did some further research, found out that 60% of people taking medication at some point take the wrong medication, that people die because of this, right? This was a serious problem. And what she did was, sorry, I got ahead of myself. So she did a first redesign of the pill bottle, and introduced better typography, introduced color coding, did a bunch of stuff. I'm not actually going to dig into the design of the pill bottle. We've talked about that in other forums. But it ended up going from that to this, right? This is the Target Clear RX system. Now, it didn't just happen, like pulling a rabbit out of a hat or Athena coming fully out of Zeus's skull. It took a lot of work. And I think of the part of the story that's not known well enough is what it took in order for this to be realized. So how did they create this thing that got, how were they able to create something that got out into the world and affected the customer?
It was an enormous undertaking, and I should stress that I did not work in a tunnel at all. It was a huge collaborative effort. I worked with the pharmacy team, pharmacy operations, the Target technology team to build the software to accommodate the new labeling system, the marketing team. There were major training sessions to train all the pharmacists on how to use this new system because they were the most important people to us. They were the front line. They had to explain how to use this new system, and they had to learn how to use it. There was a bit of a learning curve involved.
Right, so this is marshaling, and this didn't actually include the pharmacy team. This is marshaling hundreds, if not thousands of people it took in order for that seemingly simple little pill bottle to be realized in the world. And I would argue that there's a few things about this. One is that thesis project, that kind of prototype of the pill bottle was crucial. Yesterday, Jared talked about envisionment, right? This is an example of an envisionment, this thing that everybody can rally around, get behind, want to realize because it's so powerful that they almost can't help themselves in trying to see something like that get out into the world. But the other thing that I think is interesting, in many organizations, if you had to marshal these many resources, if you had to work with these many departments, very easily could one of them just kind of shut down an entire project for whatever reason, right? There's a lot of stage gates here where a go, no-go could have said no-go. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why one of the biggest reasons why companies don't deliver great experiences, is because of a particular part of an organization that's able to basically stop some really interesting idea from being realized. The other crucial thing about Target and about this pill bottle within Target is that this was the right problem for them to solve their way, because of the Target brand, right? The Target brand standing for that kind of affordable design, design for the masses. The preferred shopping, this is their brand value statement. Preferred shopping destination for our guests by delivering outstanding value, continuous innovation, and an exceptional guest experience. Because everybody ideally at this organization signs up to deliver on this, that also encourages them to not get in the way when a good idea is trying to get out into the world. And so for me, this is about the importance of good, meaningful branding internally married with the appropriate solution to this problem. Walmart or CVS, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to do this. They could probably do something better than they're doing now that is appropriate, but it probably wouldn't look like this, right? This is what's right for Target. So that's the other challenge, is figuring out what's right for you. So I'm going to actually just kind of wrap up here. So in terms of thinking about kind of how are we going to move from user experience to customer experience, how are we going to help organizations make this change? Creating perhaps and engaging a cross-functional team is crucial. Engendering honest empathy for the customer, articulating a vision, articulating both that empathy and a vision for how to address those customer needs broadly in a compelling fashion, and then making a thing, prototyping in some way. Because I think one of the things about that Target experience was by having this prototype, they could all rally around it and figure out what it meant for them. I think too often companies try to reorg without having a goal or a thing that they're going to actually produce, so they reorg almost for the sake of it. But it doesn't end up helping them actually deliver better. What you need to do is figure out what you want to deliver and then allow the organization to evolve to suit the delivery of that thing. So that's another role, again, I think, for design and experience design, to help create these prototypes, these artifacts that allow an organization to evolve. One other thing, though, that I think is crucial and is often forgotten, and it goes back to that my commentary about United, Deborah Adler points out the pharmacists were the most important people to us. They were the front line. Herb Kelleher, if you create an environment where people truly participate, you don't need control. They know what needs to be done, and they do it. The more that people will devote themselves to your cause on a voluntary basis, a willing basis, the fewer hierarchies and control mechanisms you need. Too often companies forget that customer experience is made of people, and that we need to empower and engage our teams to feel like they can make the right decisions in order to help the customers. This is not going to be easy. The targeting story spans at least a couple of years. I saw a presentation from a woman who did work on redesigning wayfinding systems for Presbyterian Hospital in New York Presbyterian, that's affiliated with Columbia University. 5 years, because there's a lot of politics. There's a lot that needs to happen in order to get people behind it. So just because we know what the answer ought to be, don't get too frustrated too quickly that change isn't happening and give up. You have to be ready for that slog. But of 362 firms that Bain & Company conducted a survey on asking, are they customer focused, 95% said they are, and 80% said they deliver a customer experience. But then when Bain asked their customers if they agree, only 8% said that those companies were delivering a superior experience. I like to think of this black part of the pie as job security. And with that, my time is done. Thank you.